And then the minute I got sued, it vanished. Like that whole identity just vanished. And what was left behind was this quaking, shivering ball of anxiety and distress and fear that didn't know the first thing to do and didn't know who she was anymore. Your job is to deliver a perfect outcome every single time. What a crazy job. What an impossible job.
Welcome to Success Reimagined. I am Dr. Amna Shabbir, your host on this journey to thrive at the intersection of ambition and wellness. In every episode, I'll help you challenge outdated definitions of success, discover practical tools and strategies for growth without compromising your well-being. I am so glad you've joined me. Let's reimagine what's possible together. Today, I'm honored to speak with Dr. Gita Pensa, an emergency physician, educator, and advocate for physician well-being, a longtime faculty member at Brown University. Dr. Pensa's advocacy stems from her own experience as the sole defendant in a $28 million malpractice lawsuit and ordeal that spanned 12 years and 2 jury trials. Determined to support other physicians facing similar challenges, she created the podcast Doctors and Litigation, the L Word, offering education and guidance on navigating malpractice litigation. Her insights have also been featured in the documentary A World of Hurt: How Medical Malpractice Fails Everyone. Dr. Pensa has been recognized nationally for her mentorship and advocacy, and today she is joining us to share her story and her expertise. Dr. Pensa, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I apologize for my background. I think I showed up to the party not knowing that it was a video call and just relying on my podcasting equipment. So, but your background is so beautiful.
Thank you so much. And the background looks wonderful. And the fact that we're even commenting on it, it ties directly into the conversation we're going to be having today, which is around perfectionism.
Oh, isn't that great? All right. Well, you can see where my roots lie.
Well, there we go. My first question was going to be, what does the word perfectionism mean to you? And has perfectionism influenced your approach to medicine and life?
Oh, what a great question. What a great opener. So the meaning of perfectionism to me has changed over time, really, since I started doing the work that I do in litigation. And in the beginning, I think I viewed perfectionism as a positive thing that, that's just somebody who wants to get all their ducks in a row, and who wants to take great care and to make sure that everything is okay and to check and double check. And I'm definitely a checker and a double checker. I didn't realize until it was actively harming me. And I'm so excited about the work that you're doing around this. I did not realize until it was actively harming me that the flip side of perfectionism is that we're not very shame resilient. And so to me now, I see perfectionism as this sort of two-faced coin, where one side is the appearance that you're hoping everybody else in the world perceives, and the other side is all the shame that you're hoping to avoid feeling. It's not a great thing in my mind, but I still think that as a doctor, I probably still cleave to some perfectionistic tendencies. I don't want anyone to think I'm a bad doctor. I don't want anyone to think that I'm less than. I only want people to think that I'm expert at that. Even that's hard to let go of sometimes, because none of us are perfect at what we do all the time. That's been a journey. I'm letting some other things go. But and the older I get, the easier that gets, believe it or not.
I love that analogy that you shared about the coin, because that's the first time that I'm hearing of all the conversations that I've had of this thought of it being a two-faced coin, where on one side, it's the flawless appearance that you're giving to the outside world while you're also hiding shame and all on the other side. And I'm going to be asking you these questions when I'm working with physicians, specifically with early career physicians. There's a lot of this fear that paralyzes us about, okay, I am potentially going to face this litigation. Like the point before any event actually transpires is just this fear. And then we have this underlying perfectionism right there. And so a lot of times when we're seeing this paralysis essentially of overworking, over documenting, the ruminations, the going back and checking the EMRs, what are your thoughts surrounding that, like this pre-event time when we're really leaning into perfectionism? And I'm just going to say it. I know it sounds like a rhetorical question, but has leaning into perfectionism ever saved a physician from litigation?
That's a really interesting question too. You bring in all the A game questions. So let me start first with the behaviors that are all in the hope to avoid litigation, right? Now, I am all for behavior that engenders good practice of medicine. I think that we have to make this differentiation between somebody who's practicing careful and reasonable medicine and somebody who is just really just knocking themselves out over. Documentation never saved anybody's life. I'm just going to, I mean, I should never speak in absolutes. I learned that with all my legal friends. But like the words in your chart, yes, it's important to communicate to the next clinician the things that happen in your visit, that information, which by the way, is getting drowned out in all of our charting right now. But the message of like, this is what happened in our visit. This is where this patient stands. This is what I feel like we should be doing next. This is the plan. That's important, right? But never did this obsessive listing of a differential diagnosis and every single possible things that maybe could have happened. We do this. That's not medicine. That is us trying to exert some sort of magical thinking that if we come up with every single possibility and write it all down, then somehow the bad juju's not going to find us. If we spend every single minute like charting and warding off against it and doing, wearing an evil eye bracelet to work. I don't know, like all the things that people do, that somehow we're not going to get involved in this. And here is the problem. It's going to find you. Like have you ever heard that old death at the marketplace story? Right? I mean, where the guy, he spends like all this time like trying to avoid death and then all of a sudden he's like, I'll go to the marketplace, and that's where death is. You can't practice medicine and not have a bad event find you. Right? It will happen, right? As careful as you are. And yes, be careful. There's a fine line between being careful and being just unreasonably like consumed, right? If you're careful is one thing, consumed is another. And I see people crossing into consumed and they're driven by fear. Fear is never an effective place to work from. I think that's probably a great place to start, right? And so the perfectionism is driving the fear. Something may happen that might make people see me in another light. And if I'm sued, the automatic thought bridge that happens there is then people are going to think I'm a bad doctor, which is, you heard me say it in the beginning, something that none of us can stand the thought of. And so we go through all of these machinations, which are not helpful to the patient and probably not helpful to us. Because if you have a bad outcome, your chart will help you in your defense, but it oftentimes will not keep you out of litigation in the first place. And that's where our fear starts.
Fear really, like that is deficit thinking. And a couple of thoughts that came up for me is you pick a physician, everyone has gone through burnout. And specifically when we're talking about perfectionism, there is about a 70% chance that you're going to burn out if you are a perfectionist. And then talking to Dr. Tom Curran and like going through his detailed research surrounding perfectionism, you don't want people who are in high pressure roles such as flying planes and operating on people or caring for people's lives be perfectionists, because they are not going to be able to handle pressure like situation when an event is happening, how you pivot, what you do to have that objectivity and like take good next steps. And yet it's like we're wearing it most of the times like a badge of honor around ourselves and like debilitated by it.
It's interesting. Most people who, and you can tell me, you are probably more of an expert on perfectionism right now than I am, but I've coached many, many people at this point. Mm-hmm. Most of the people who identify as perfectionists talk to themselves in a terrible voice. They are hypercritical in their own minds. They'll call themselves stupid. Why'd you do that dumb thing? Why are you doing this? It gets a lot worse. It gets, you're ugly, you're fat, you're stupid. They use this as a motivation for them to do better. Now, where that came from, if it came from childhood or I don't know. But many people do speak to themselves in that kind of voice in order to propel themselves to be perfect. And that will get you so far, right? That got you to med school, probably. Maybe you got you through training. You will hit a ceiling with that. And no, you don't want the person in a high pressure situation to be the person that yells at themselves in their head all the time, because there will be eventually a situation that requires creative thinking, strategizing, pivoting. And the person who's too busy yelling at themselves in their own head over those things doesn't have the space to maneuver and pivot creatively, right? They're not thinking strategically. They're thinking protectively. And so, no, you don't want those people in those really, really high level roles. You want people who can think on their feet and not be so worried about what other people are thinking about them.
Absolutely, 100%. If you could say that one more time, it would be you are on spot
I don't
because
know if I could. It just comes out.
exactly. Like perfectionists are severely lacking in self compassion, and self criticism is dialed way up. And you said it so elegantly like you want that person to not be yelling at themselves and not be so worried about how they're appearing to the outside world and really actually be able to pivot and help and be in that space. So let's fast forward a little bit. And now you're, looking at somebody who is going through litigation and medicine and they are perfectionists and here their worlds are colliding.
Mm.
What is that experience like? And what are some of the things like you wish people would know? I tried to break this question down into two parts, but it's so heavy. And I feel like it's all lumped into one. Like, how am I viewing myself? How are other people viewing me? Let's start there.
Well, I am well aware of what this does to people's identity and their self-esteem. When you get a letter, you get served with notice. And it's interesting because when you understand the law, you know that the language that they're using is just boilerplate language. They're talking about your negligence and your malfeasance and all these things, all the ways in which you're super awful. And it sounds like they're saying you're the worst human that ever lived. This is pretty standard, right? It's just never been applied to you before. Like we're the high achiever and all these, external performers, and we have all these metrics of our success, and we think pretty highly of ourselves for the most part, except when that voice kicks in. But we've achieved certain levels and we care about people, and we have this feeling that if you're a nice person and you're smart and you're doing good for your patient, then all right, like you should be all set. And so here they come with this message in a very authoritative way saying, no, you're wrong. You're awful. You're terrible. You are a bad human being. You are a villain. You are a villain. And we don't know why you practice medicine and you should stop, basically, is the messaging, right? And we take that very much to heart. I can remember my whole identity. I thought I was a great doctor when I got sued. I was like 5 years out of residency. I was a nocturnist in a hospital and in the ER, and we didn't have hospital assistants. So I would be the only doctor in the hospital at night. So I would just run this whole hospital at night, and I'd go to the ICU, I'd go to labor and delivery, I would do all this stuff. I'd come back down after my ER. Like I thought I was a hot ticket. Like I really thought I was great. And then the minute I got sued, it vanished. Like that whole identity just vanished. And what was left behind was this quaking, shivering ball of anxiety and distress and fear that didn't know the first thing to do and didn't know who she was anymore. And it's very easy for someone whose whole identity and sense of self-worth, when that's attacked, when you are a perfectionist and you don't have that internal locus of like, no, I am good. I am good. And, the wind can howl, but the mountain won't bow to it. Like that's hard for a perfectionist. That's really hard. And so that voice in your head can get pretty mean, and then it turns into the, why did you do this? How could you do that? If only you should have done this, you should have done that. Then you wouldn't have this problem. And now everyone's going to know. And all of this is so distressing for us. And there's a lot of perfectionists in medicine. And you talked about Will Barton before. A lot of the interesting research in shame in medicine, shame in general is any society's tool for control, right? And when you have the Society of Medicine and everybody in there is selected to be a perfectionist,
Wow.
the way medicine keeps us all in line is with shame, right? You don't want to be the not team player. You don't want to be the person that leaves at 6 to pick up their kid. You don't want to be the person that's like, no, I'm taking every weekend off. Like, how dare you say that you want every weekend off? Like,
Yeah.
and you feel shame around these things. And that's just our norms. Those are our norms. But then when litigation kicks in and that's your makeup, you will struggle. You will have a very hard time with that.
I am reminded of a phrase that another friend of mine said in a group, and she said, shame hides in ritual and tradition.
Mm.
And what you just said reminded me of that very much. It's almost like we're just perpetuating, not almost, we do that. I mean, I am not great when I have to work night shift. And I knew that from the first day that I went and did a night shift. Like, it's awful. Like, but I had to pretend and then just, we shine our badges of suffering and overwork as we're doing this. Thank you so much for, by the way, sharing that very vivid image when you got the news and the letter. And I was just trying to walk through that. That just sounded horrible.
It was. It was, and I was unprepared. And, it's interesting. There are a lot of things in medicine that we are prepared for that are terrible, right? If I'm an ER doc, we're prepared for death. The first time a patient dies on you, it's hard, but you knew it was coming, or you saw it when you were in training. You kind of got a feel for what that was going to be like. You sort of waded into it, and then it happens. And somehow that's sort of gathered up into your ethos of who you are as a physician. Like in some way, that just becomes part of your having this front seat to humanity, which is a great privilege in medicine, right? So we're prepared for that. We accept that. We bring that on. It's difficult, but it's a good suffering. It's built into this wonderful privilege of being a doctor. Litigation is a little different because even though numbers wise you thought maybe it was coming, maybe, or maybe not, since nobody talks about it, and since you don't get to see anybody do it in real time, and since you don't get to see anyone be like a role model of resilience in it, you are not really prepared for the impact at all. At all. It makes it so much more difficult than it has to be. So it was terrible for me at the time.
Well, again, thank you for sharing that and being so open with that and giving hope in that. What I heard was hope, because here's my concern with being a perfectionist, with being in medicine and being so utterly exhausted. Being a perfectionist, being in medicine, practicing in systems and places and spaces that are just exhausting to deal with, and then working, not just being a self-oriented perfectionist, but also the societal expectations of what we want. So I felt the maximum brunt of that when I was practicing primary care full time, and the expectations of what I was supposed to do, what I was supposed to model. And my worry is that we're all going to get tired and burnt out, and we're leaving in droves. And so I am selfishly worried, not just as a physician, but more so as a customer of our healthcare system, because when I was going through some physical health challenges in the start, I was expecting my first daughter. I was a resident. I was pregnant at that time. And in the ER, when I was handed certain news, I just felt like we could have done such a better job communicating. And as a patient who is a physician, I just felt like everything went over my head. And then I was prescribed something. Had I taken it, I could have had complications further with my child. And I was upset about that. But here was my question. The resident taking care of me hadn't slept in like the last 3 days.
Yeah.
And I didn't say anything to anybody up until now. And I worry, I selfishly worry. And I think that what we're trying to glorify is completely the wrong thing on all, on societal levels, on internal medicine, cultural levels.
I think you're right. On a lot of levels, the practice of medicine is getting more difficult on just so many levels. And part of what's making it more difficult is that there has been a mass exodus. And the exodus will probably continue as people remain burned out and as litigation continues to be this, really difficult thing to contend with in medicine that happens quite frequently. And in these systems where we are understaffed and we don't have enough help and we don't have enough bodies to deliver care, and we are being stretched thinner, and we are asked to work faster. Yeah, as a consumer of healthcare, I think we should be worried. I think that the people who were there still fighting the good fight are working really hard. They're trying to achieve the impossible, right? They're charged with perfection, right? They're perfectionists who have also been charged with perfectionism. That's their job. Your job is to deliver a perfect outcome every single time. What a crazy job. What an impossible job. And then the consequence for not being able to deliver that perfect outcome every time is severe, or at least it feels severe. It feels like the consequences are everything about you. This was always a game you were going to lose. Like I said at the beginning, this thing is coming. The adverse event is coming. I don't say that to scare people. I say that it just in the same way that death is inevitable in emergency medicine, right? There are things that are inevitable in your practice that we somehow have to learn how to absorb and work through and own. And this is one of those things, litigation and adverse events is unexpected adverse events, is one of those things where we have just sort of been left to our own devices, and we're all perfectionists who are afraid of judgment and this and that. Like, we haven't really collectively developed a wisdom around it. And that's what we need. We need to sort of step into this place of, these wise responders to these events who know how to handle themselves when called upon in civil litigation, who know how to be good defendants and defend their care, but also to learn how to incorporate that within us and move forward. But it's getting very hard. The fewer people are left to do the job well, and the people who want to stay, it is frightening to know that society expects you to deliver something that is just, under these circumstances, impossible to deliver.
Absolutely. And there are 2 points that come to my mind. One is, so it's going to happen. It can happen, very likely, but we like to hold on to the narrative as far as medical education culture goes. Like, let's pretend it never happened. It won't happen. So we're leaning into that.
Or if you're just exceptional enough, it won't happen, right? Like, as somehow there's that feeling that if you are perfect enough, if you are exceptional enough, you will be the exception to the rule. Because we all love being like the positive exceptions to the rule, right? Somehow we have this feeling that if we're exceptional enough, it won't happen. And we hide behind that. Don't learn the things that we need to learn in order to contend with it when it happens.
And I feel that the most compassionate of us are hit the hardest. And
Of course. I think people don't understand is the degree to which we grieve with them. That's something that I don't think the public will ever understand, especially when in this adversarial system that's set up where they make the doctor your enemy, right? They want to, and the plaintiff's attorneys do this very well. Like, the way it's set up, the way it's partitioned, it's very easy for them to have a plaintiff or a physician or a family member begin to think of the physician as their enemy, which is a terrible thing to have to contend with in the first place. But when you are a compassionate person, when you went into medicine for the right reasons, as I believe that most of us did, because you were helpers and because you had a certain skill set and a mindset, and yes, some degree of endurance and exceptionalism in terms of like, yeah, I can, when required, I can stay up for this long. When required, I can do these things. It shouldn't be every single day. But we had this feeling like we could do this as really a gift to humanity, right? So when something terrible happens, whether or not we're getting sued for it, that will take up a lot of real estate in your mind. And the more compassionate and caring you are, the more you will make it your fault initially until you get some perspective on it. The more you will, even in situations where it's not your fault. It's not your fault. Society expects perfectionism. They want you to pull a rabbit out of a hat every time. The day that you don't pull the rabbit out of the hat, when you're of that mindset, will become the worst day of your life. When that bad thing happens to the patient, which is undeniably a terrible thing for the patient, when you are that feeling kind of person, it will also become the worst day of your life. And those are things that have to get worked through. They really do. I mean, yeah, there's like Dr. Deaths out there that are like, whatever, slashing and burning, and they don't care. There are not a lot of those. They make podcasts about them, but there are not a lot of those. Most of us care. Whether or not, as time goes by, that gets, as you're burned out more and more and people get depersonalized and that kind of stuff, like maybe that goes away a little bit. But like, for most of us, we feel it. We really feel it. And there's no forum for us to really talk about those feelings with. And we're afraid. We're afraid that it's discoverable. We're afraid that somehow is going to use that against us, that the plaintiff's attorney is going to somehow find out that you're a human being with a beating heart that actually cares and feels badly that something happened, and they'll leverage that word. Like, we're afraid of all these things, but we just need to learn how to navigate that.
absolutely well said. And echo everything that you mentioned. And it reminded me of what I think I was talking to Dr. Sabah Fatima on her. I interviewed her once, and she mentioned this analogy. Like, what if there's, and I'm paraphrasing, that there's a nice porcelain breakable vase that's like sitting somewhere on ground level and a child runs by and knocks it over and breaks. It's like the analogy that she gave was like, you're going to just put the child in timeout and yell at them and berate them constantly for something that was like in a place where it's going to fall and it's going to break and crack. So I completely echo with whatever you said. Now, shifting a little bit
Hmm.
to what we can do and what can medicine as a whole do in terms of how we look at mistakes, how we look at things, and what can doctors do? What can cultural shifts navigate in terms of change?
Well, I think one of the things that we can do is talk about it much more openly. I think that we can, in our own communities, one of the great difficulties is that trainees, young doctors, people who haven't gone through litigation don't have any role models in it, really. And what that trains us to believe is that litigation is shameful, right? Litigation is common. It's actually not shameful. Everybody's going to wind up, not everybody, but almost everybody's going to wind up facing it at some point. But when you don't talk about a thing in a community, that thing becomes shameful, right? If you grow up in a home where they don't talk about sex, sex is shameful. If you grow up in a home where they don't talk about money, talking about money is shameful. And so in the House of Medicine, we don't talk about litigation. And therefore, litigation is shameful. And not just that reason. I mean, obviously, there is the external judgment of the lay public and the way that our actions get interpreted and misinterpreted by people outside of medicine. Like, that's also a problem.
Shifting gears a little bit now, I would love to hear your thoughts on what can be done. How can we be better physicians ourselves in terms of caring for ourselves when we have all this perfectionism playing out, and have better cultures in medicine so that we can actually care for our patients better?
One thing that I think that we can do culturally in medicine is learn how to talk about litigation much more openly. It's one of these things that once we start talking about it and bringing it into the light, and everybody who has been suffering in a silo can understand, oh my gosh, there are all these other people who are dealing with it. And I think they're all good doctors. Maybe they also feel the same for me. Like, maybe I don't have to hide. With the work of Brene Brown, what we know is that the best way to contend with shame is to have it be met with empathy by a caring person who understands them, to be able to speak it out loud and have it be received with empathy. And that is really, I think, the place that we need to go in medicine. I think we need to build systems so that we can take care of our own, because most of us know that that's how we're best understood. Like, medicine is its whole own world. And so building systems of support and understanding within the House of Medicine, but really just normalizing conversations around it, normalizing support and education programs around litigation when it happens. All of those things are going to help people feel less like the pariah that I felt like when I first started. It was unnecessary. It was unnecessary. Adverse events happen in medicine. Mistakes happen in medicine. They're almost everyday events in medicine. And so when our society is perfectionistic, which medicine is, right, we want to convey, we've almost done too good a job at selling the world on this idea that we can fix everything, we can help everything, we can cure everything. Like, we're like, look at us, we're so great, which we are in many ways. We do a lot of wonderful things, but we also don't want our warts exposed. We don't want the world to look at medicine. I mean, and we've got a bad rap right now. It's probably worse than it actually needs to be. But it'd be a lot better if we were really forthright about the limitations of medicine. And these are the things that we can do. These are things aren't mistakes. These things are mistakes. One of the things that we talk about in this documentary, A World of Hurt, that you so kindly mentioned, one of the things that comes up is the communication resolution program, or that kind of culture, and the Michigan model. The reason why all these cases go through civil litigation really is because we have no forum in medicine to actually adjudicate care. So somehow the civil litigation system became the arbiter of whether care was good or whether a doctor is good at what they do. But it's not adjudicated by anyone that knows anything about medicine, right? It's just become a proxy for that because we don't have a system in medicine to judge care, right? And so this system that's meant to be just dispute resolution has become this actual, like, oh, are they a good doctor? Are they not a good doctor? We all equate that with how many lawsuits do they have? Oh, they must be a bad doctor. The public also does that. That has filled in a vacuum that we should own in medicine. And so the wonderful thing I think about these there's a lot of wonderful things, but one of the things that's better about adopting one of these CRP type cultures is that you can, as human beings, still continue to talk to your patient or the family of the patient if they've been harmed. You can express your condolences. You can explain what happened. You can answer their questions. You can sort of work to some sort of a solution together, and we can learn from our mistakes. That doesn't happen in civil litigation. And so those two things, us being able to talk about things more openly, and I think a more wide adoption of the CRP model are two directions where we all ought to go. It's going to help us a lot. I think it's going to save a lot of souls. I really think that.
That absolutely sounds much more productive than
It is.
just silence and shaming.
Yeah, productive and restorative, I think. Civil litigation is not that. It's horribly not productive. It is not restorative in the least. It destroys everybody on both sides. The only person, the lawyers walk away with money, right? And maybe the plaintiff gets some recovery after so many years and so much heartache. There is undoubtedly a better way to do this.
So when we talk about now, I want you to please shift gears a little bit and talk to that doctor who is where you were the first time right now, because it's just an awful place to be in terms of the isolation, the loneliness, and all the other things that you're mentioning. And nobody just like talks about it.
Yeah. Yeah. The first thing that I would ask you to do is sort of in the vein of what we were talking about before, is to talk to yourself like you would a friend, the sort of number one rule of self-compassion. If you are afraid that other people are judging you, if you look at the event that happened and pretend it happened to a colleague that you respect and admire, like, what would you say to them? In all likelihood, you would not say, you are a terrible doctor. You should never have done this. You should flee the country, like whatever other things you're saying. You would probably say something supportive and like, this is understandable. This happens. You were doing your best. You were doing your best in a difficult arena. Like, that is a stretch for a lot of people, but learning how to talk to yourself in a way in which you are not the villain. Plenty of people in this process are going to try to make you the villain. You are not the villain. You were there doing your best under difficult circumstances, getting more and more difficult by the day. And maybe this wasn't even your fault at all. Maybe you actually, there's sometimes these reframes that can happen where you realize, like, I'll tell you a story in a minute if you have the time or the patience for it, but we're so hard on ourselves. And so to take some time and to take care of yourself, but understand that you are more than this case. Like, you are equally about all the people that you have helped, who admire you, who love you, who think that, you saved their life. You are much more made of that than of this one day and this one case. You'll have a magnifying glass on that case, and it will take up a lot of time, as they say, a lot of real estate in your head. But that's not all you are. It's really not.
That was so beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I would love to hear more about how you help everyone, because you're just doing such wonderful work out there. And like, I keep bringing us back to the point that, yes, we're talking about better systems, better support for our clinicians. But ultimately, I keep bringing it back to the point that this is what's helping our patients and this is what's helping our communities. As I continue to watch people leave medicine, and it's almost the ones that want to enter. I was presenting to a couple of medical students recently in on a variety of ways. And, it's almost like self-sacrificial going towards clinical care. And then we're just like so surprised that not every one of our medical students really is just willing to go in clinical care and be at the bedside, because it's becoming so brutal. So in all terms of healing, I'm so grateful for the work that you do. And I would love to have our audience know more about that. I love your podcast.
So I have this podcast called Doctors and Litigation, the L Word. That was my first sort of foray into thinking about how do we change culture around this. And as a medical educator, I was thinking about, how do we talk about it in a way that will really, anyone could listen to it, start here, end here at the end of season 1, and you'll have a pretty good idea of what this is all about. And I knew at this point, this was much later on in my litigation story. I mean, it lasted so long, but around 2015 is around the time I started thinking, like, there has to be a better way to do this. Like, I've been suffering with this for a long time. There must be some way. And really started educating myself, not only about all the ways that one can dig out of a hole in medicine, but also tort law and legal performance and all that type of stuff. So the podcast was the first thing. That's there. That's free. That's open access. I do a lot of speaking around this. I'm really excited that it's gotten to the point now where like even keynotes for professional societies and things like that, they want to hear a talk about litigation, which to me is shocking, but I'm always happy to come speak. So I do a lot of grand rounds and things like that. I have a coaching practice. I do one-to-one coaching for clinicians, physicians after adverse events and in preparation for litigation and in defense. I do witness preparation work for defense attorneys and for insurance companies. And lastly, I have 2 courses. I already had a course that I have licensed to insurance companies for them to use for their defendants. I could not keep up with the one-to-one work, to tell you the truth. And so I thought, like, well, how do, for people who aren't really in distress but just don't know anything, like what could we do? And so I developed this course for them. I have an expanded version of that I'm working on now. I don't know when this is airing, but that's going to enroll in March. It'll be an hour a week for 12 weeks, along with some live sessions and things like that, and really hoping to get people sort of, everything they need to know from A to Z. I don't know where I'm going after. I'm trying that out. I'm hoping that format works. But what's important to me is that we have some culture change around this topic, and then people learn, they just arm themselves with knowledge and the knowledge that they'll be okay. It's civil litigation. You're going to be okay. It is about money. You'll figure it out, but you need some tools. You need some tools first, and then you'll find your way.
Thank you so much for sharing that and for the wonderful insights that you've shared with us today. And I will put all the links when this airs, so our audience has a way of reaching out to you and the impactful work that you're doing to benefit from that.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the work that you do too, Amna.
Appreciate it. This episode is part of a special series and my budding book project on unmasking perfectionism. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. Just a quick reminder, while I am a physician, I'm not your physician, and nothing in this podcast is medical advice or any kind of professional advice. Everything shared here is based on my personal experiences, and the views expressed are entirely my own. If you enjoyed today's episode, I would love for you to rate, review, subscribe, and share the show with anyone who might need a little inspiration to redefine their own version of success. I'll see you next time. Until then, keep reimagining success one small step at a time.